Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to the live stream. Do me a favor, if you're in the chat, put a 1 in there just to let me know that everything is coming in loud and clear. We're going to talk about whether or not Donald Trump can fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell in this live stream. Now, if you watched yesterday's video, you'll know that we've already kind of explored this topic to some extent, but I was inundated with comments on that video to the effect that Trump cannot fire Powell, it's not in the law, the Fed's not part of the government, so it's not going to happen. And I was just surprised with the number of comments kind of parroting this same talking point. Some of them, it's a comment section on YouTube. Some of them are pretty nasty, actually. But I wanted to do this one as a live stream because I'm going to be watching the chat, and I want everybody to participate in this. Let me know what you think about these topics, because I don't think it's really black and white, that it just can't happen. And it's an important thing for stackers to keep an eye on, because if Powell is replaced, presumably it's going to be with a much more dovish Fed chair, and that could have a big impact on the price of gold and the price of silver and the value of the US dollar. Don't forget, you can buy your gold and silver at SD Bullion. Right now, new customers can get gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new. Now, I think it's pretty funny that people would say, oh, the Fed's not part of the government, and so, Trump has no power over Powell. Now, some might say that the Fed is the real government. There's something to be said for that point of view. They certainly exert a disproportionate amount of control over essentially everything. I mean, the Fed controls, how much interest you're going to earn in your bank account. They determine the rate of a home loan. Therefore, they determine the cost of your housing. They determine your retirement. I mean, they determine all sorts of things by controlling the money supply. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a long time, you'll know it's not like I'm some big fan of the Fed, and I'm well aware of the fact that the Federal Reserve is as Federal Express. That's the old adage, not really part of the government. But, they are a little different from just your average private entity in the sense that, for one, Fed chair is appointed by the president. The president's not out there appointing CEOs to other companies, but he does appoint the chair of the Fed. In fact, Powell was appointed by Trump, so that's pretty interesting. But, there's been a lot of uncertainty about this. Trump floated the idea of firing Powell. He asked GOP lawmakers on Tuesday if he should fire Powell, and apparently they expressed significant amount of support for the idea. And then yesterday, he was in the Oval Office and he was giving some commentary surrounding the Fed chair, whether or not he would be fired. And initially, it sounded as if that was in fact going to be what he would pursue. And the remarkable thing, as we covered in yesterday's video, so, if you saw that, we've already talked about this a bit, but the price of gold spiked up as Trump was making those comments. And then when he said actually that he wasn't going to fire Powell, we saw the price of gold come down. And you can see it here on this 15-minute chart of the gold price. That was when markets believed there was a possibility of Powell being fired, and then that was when that, was sunk, that idea. You can see it in the dollar, too. If we look at the chart of the DXY, the dollar relative to other currencies, it plummeted pretty quickly when markets thought that Powell was going to be replaced. Now, Silver Something in the chat here says, people really need to start listening to Trump. He's full of crap, always has been, always will be. And I'm reading that from the chat. And yeah, I mean, one thing about Trump is that he is incredibly mercurial, right? He can change his tune at the drop of a dime. I mean, he can tell you there's going to be tariffs one day, the tariffs are postponed the next, right? Things have a tendency to change. So one thing I would take away from Trump telling us that it is, quote, highly unlikely that he will fire Fed Powell is that that could change at any moment. Now, there's also this issue of Powell lying to Congress regarding renovations at the Fed. Now, this is a pretty banal thing. I think normally nobody would pay any attention to this, nobody would care, but this happens to occur at a time when the Fed chair is at odds with the president. Powell has been refusing to cut rates, citing Fed independence and uncertainty surrounding the impact of tariffs on inflation. By the way, the most recent inflation data was up, indicating that tariffs will have a effect on prices. But then, Trump calling Powell a moron, an idiot, telling him that he's too late cutting rates, he's going to crush this great economy that we have. The reality is that we just have way, way too much debt, and to avoid the whole system collapsing, we probably do need lower rates. I mean, we need it like we need a hole in the head. We don't actually need it. It's going to destroy the dollar, but that's what we're going to get. I mean, the big, beautiful bill, it's already passed. It demonstrates that any talk of fiscal restraint or reining in spending, that was all just nonsense. That's not going to happen. So we're going to need lower rates unless we want a financial crisis, the reality. But Powell was making these comments to Congress. He was doing testimony there. They asked him about renovations at the Federal Reserve headquarters, and he seems to have misled them somewhat about what is actually taking place. Now, I mean, it's a $2.5 billion renewal. The Fed has been responsible for a lot more than $2.5 billion of theft from the American people. So, whatever. Again, I think that normally this would just fly under the radar. Nobody would care, except for the fact that Trump wants Powell out. But this may actually allow Trump to fire Powell, quote, for cause. Now, a lot of people left me comments saying, you can't have the president fire the Fed chair because it's not in the law. There's no law saying that they can do that. And, there is a law, I guess, that the president can appoint the Fed chair, but he can't remove him, right? Maybe for cause they'd be able to. But also, not to put too fine a point on it or be a jerk here, but some of these people leaving these comments were pretty, rude. I got one comment that said, it's Civics 101. The Fed is independent. It's not part of the government. Morons, as if anybody who believes that Trump could actually fire Powell is a moron. Well, look, I mean, if you believe that a president is going to be constrained by the law, that's kind of naive. I mean, it's kind of hopelessly naive, right? I mean, if you believe everything that you learn in Civics 101 class, then you probably also think that the Federal Reserve is an altruistic organization that manages the business cycle and, just is a panacea of wealth and opportunity for the economy. I remember taking civics and economics in public school, and that's pretty much what they tell you. So, look, I mean, if the U.S. is going to go to war, Congress is supposed to declare war. Congress hasn't declared war since World War II. We've been in any wars since then. So, since when has the law been a constraint to politicians? They do what they do. They do what they can get away with. And Trump may well be able to get away with firing Powell. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just take a look at what markets did, right? The dollar tanked when it thought that there was a possibility that Powell could be out of there. So obviously, markets, you don't have to look at the law, you don't have to look at anybody's opinion, just look at what the markets are doing. And markets will tell you that there is, in fact, a real possibility of this, right? Real money was being put behind the idea that Powell could be out. And again, the reason that this is going to be so bullish if it does occur for gold and silver is because Trump has already told us that he thinks the federal funds rate should be 3 percentage points lower than it is right now. That's 300 basis points. Typically, when the Fed cuts rates, they're cutting 25 basis points at a time. So that's like 12 rate cuts all in one shot. Now, is a Fed chair that Trump puts in there going to achieve that? Silver something says, but why do you want him to get away with something else? I don't want him to get away with anything. I mean, I wish we didn't have a Federal Reserve, right? I wish we had a system where interest rates were set by the free market, but I wish that's what we had. But, you can wish in one hand and, the rest of the saying. It's not about what I want. It's just about what is going to occur. It's not like I have any dog in the fight between Powell and Trump. I mean, one's a corrupt central banker, one's a corrupt politician. What do I care? Neither one is looking out for me or you, by the way. They're enriching themselves, right, by the system. And if they have a conflict, well, it's just because they disagree over how rapidly they want to debase the currency. I mean, that's the only disagreement here. It's like, I want to debase it slowly and I want to debase it super fast. So again, it's not like when I talk about this stuff, I have any vested interest either way. My interest is in what is actually going to happen, not in what I wish would happen. Because, you can hope for the best, but you got to prepare for the worst. And the worst case scenario here is that a new chairman is put in. And now that is only one of 12 voting members of the FOMC, but I also believe that it is possible that Trump can potentially exert influence over the FOMC to get what he wants in the form of lower rates. And again, it's not my opinion. Markets obviously think that this is a possibility as well. You don't have to speculate about it. We could argue about it ad nauseum all day. There's points and counterpoints, but just look at what real money in the market was doing. It was bidding up the price of gold and selling off the dollar. So, given what we have right now, we have a scenario where it's not being priced in that the Fed chair is going to be replaced. Markets are taking Trump at his word that he is not going to seek to replace Powell. But should that change, then we've already gotten a preview of what is going to happen, and that is that the metals will soar and the dollar will tank. And Julia Stryker in the chat here points out that Bitcoin and equities will skyrocket as well. Yeah, they will. Bitcoin is already, what is it at right now? Let's take a look. It's been on quite a rip, $119,000. Look, Ripple up 10% today. And I know a lot of stackers kind of hate on the crypto assets, digital assets. I own both Bitcoin and Ripple. I'm in the green on both. I don't regret buying them. Do I trust them in a grid down scenario? No. That's what I got physical precious metals for. But will they likely rip much higher if the Fed starts printing tons of money? Yeah, they probably will. And, that's real money. So you can, poo-poo crypto. But just look at the performance thus far. And a lot of times people will say, oh, it's like a tulip mania. But, tulip mania was tulips got really valuable one time and then they crashed and were almost worthless. Bitcoin has gone up many times. Yeah, it's highly volatile. It's not a replacement for gold. It's not digital gold at all. It's a speculative risk asset. But given the fact that we're probably being ushered into an era of central bank digital currencies and tokenization, I think it's a good idea to have some crypto. If I had to pick what I was going to have, I would have silver. That would be my number one asset. I think it's the most undervalued asset on the planet right now, physical silver. I think I've made that pretty clear over the years. But, I'm not one to poo-poo the crypto assets either. Now, let me go back to the chat here. Krusty White Bread says we should make Smart Silver Stacker the chair of the Federal Reserve. Yeah, don't want that job. Thanks. But, if I was there, I don't know what I would do as the Fed chair. I don't think there's a right thing that the Fed chair can do because, again, we should have free markets setting the rate of interest, right? Lenders and borrowers should decide between the two of them on a price for money. And that's the thing. Rates are a price. They're the price of credit. So like anything else, those should just be set by supply and demand instead of having this artificial system. But we're so deep into this artificial system now that the idea of having a market rate of interest would probably collapse the whole system. Look at this. This is the U.S. national debt clock. We're at $37.1 trillion now, according to usdebtclock.org. And I mean, I don't even think they report this stuff accurately anymore. It's probably a slightly higher number than that. And then, this is the interest on the debt, the current interest expenditures. You notice how that's going exponential, and it's over $1 trillion now? This is the real reason that we need lower rates. It's not because we have this great economy. It's not because the Fed has kept rates so high for so long. 4% interest rates, 5% interest rates, not really that high historically. They're still kind of at the low end. And I'm laughing because I'm reading the comments here. Paulie says he bought 2 tulips in 2013. He sold one at $600, but the other still sits in the safe. No matter what happens, it only costs $22 that day. Well, maybe Tulip Mania 2.0. But this is the real reason that we need lower rates. It's because the only way that you can pay off $37.1 trillion in debt, or not even pay it off. I mean, that's not even going to happen. We've been told numerous times that we don't even need to worry about how big the debt gets. Remember, Yellen told us that we don't need to worry about the size of the debt. All we have to worry about is the cost of servicing that debt. Well, this is that cost. Should we be worried yet? What do you think? Put a 1 in the chat if you think that we should be worried about the cost of servicing the U.S. debt now. I mean, if not now, when do we worry about it? It's already bigger than the defense budget. Soon, the cost of servicing the debt will exceed all the other big government programs. It'll be higher than Social Security. It'll be higher than Medicare. And eventually, if we continue on the trajectory that we are on, the cost of servicing the debt will absorb all of the tax revenue. And at that point, then how do you fund the real spending, the real programs? Well, you borrow more, right? You can see how this might be a problem. And when Trump says that we need interest rates 3% lower, Trump somehow knows the magical number where interest rates should be. He says, I know interest rates better than Powell. I mean, the idea that any human, any fallible human would know on any given day what the interest rate should be, then it is ludicrous, right? The only way that you can know what interest rates should actually be to have an efficient and prosperous economy is by allowing borrowers and lenders to come to an agreement, right? Setting the price of interest it's the worst kind of price control you can have. Everybody worries about price controls on food, right? Harris, during the election, was talking about price controls. And yeah, that is a scary thought, right? I mean, we've seen how that works out. In Venezuela, they had price controls. And what does it mean? Just bare shelves, right? But the idea that, that's going to be a problem when we already have price controls on maybe one of the most important things in the economy, the price of credit, that's the bigger problem, right? And that's why we're on this trajectory that we were on, because in a sane economy with sound money, where you had a free market setting the price of things, including credit, the government would never be able to get into this much debt, right? Rates should already be much, much higher. I mean, imagine if your balance sheet as an individual looked like the government's. If you go to a bank and you say, well, I earn, what's the tax revenue? I think it's on here right now. U.S. federal tax revenue. Okay, so $5 trillion, spending official, it's probably higher than the $7 trillion, debt $37 trillion. So some rough numbers here. So if you go to the bank and you say, I earn $50,000 a year, and I spend $70,000 a year, and I have, what's the math here, $370,000 in debt, what kind of an interest rate do you think the bank is going to give you? Do you think they're going to give you a good rate if you go with that kind of balance sheet? They're probably not even going to loan you any money. And if they do, it's going to be at some insanely usurious rate, 20, 30%, like a credit card. They'll give you that. But, if you go to a bank as an individual and you say like, hey, I've got no debt, I spend $20,000 a year, I earn $100,000, I mean, the bank will loan you money at a very low rate then, right? A lender, I mean, any sane lender, an individual, doesn't have to be a bank. We don't have to talk about banks. Just any person would lend you money at a lower rate. Like two people come to you. One of them has a government style balance sheet where they spend way more than they earn. They have a huge amount of debt. And you get another person who comes who spends way less than they earn and they have no debt. Who are you taking the bigger risk loaning to, right? And to compensate for that higher risk, you need higher rates. So already rates are actually way too low. They're far lower than they would be in a free market, but Trump wants them even lower. And it's not like Powell is some, bastion of sanity here. I mean, he says that stable prices means debasing the currency 2% every year. Excuse me. So, yeah, Crusty White Bread makes a great point. He says, if I owned an aircraft carrier, they'd loan me the cash. And that's about the bottom line here. I mean, the U.S. debt is backed up by military power. And guess what else it's backed up by? You. If you're a U.S. taxpayer, you are the chattel that backs up the U.S. debt. That has all been borrowed in your name. And by the way, if you're a U.S. taxpayer, you're currently on the hook for $323,052. So this system is not set up to benefit you. Can Trump fire Powell? Yeah, he probably can. I mean, just because the law says he can't do it and the Federal Reserve is not part of the government, I wouldn't put it past Trump to not be able to pull this off. I mean, maybe he can't, right? It's a possibility that he couldn't and he wouldn't be able to get it done. And Powell, in his own right, I'm sure has some levers he can pull. But Trump also has this thing right now with Powell lying to Congress about renovations of all things. And this may give him the leverage he needs. And if this isn't it, he may find something else, right? Powell's term, I think, is up in like 8 months. So between now and then, we may very well see a new precedent being set where a Federal Reserve chair is removed by the president. I wouldn't rule it out. And just because it's not the way the law is written doesn't mean it's impossible. If that happens, well, you're going to see the price of gold and silver soar. And you're going to see the even more deficit spending, even more outlandish debt being accumulated, and it's going to transfer to other areas of the economy as well. This is going to inflate debt bubbles everywhere, right? You'll probably see the price of real estate shoot up because suddenly it'll be cheaper to get a mortgage. So there will be more lent money chasing after real estate. That will create a wealth effect, right? Everybody's going to feel rich. Problem is, price of everything is going to soar. That means inflation. So there's going to be a bunch of people that feel wealthier on paper. Then when they sell those assets, they're going to pay a bunch of capital gains taxes to the government, even though, everything that they're buying costs more money. So they haven't really gained anything. But people like the idea of, getting rich on paper. I mean, these days, if you're making six figures, I think a lot of people are making six figures these days. And back in the day, that used to be like you were, doing really well for yourself. But now, if you're earning six figures, the low six figures, you're just barely getting by, right? So it's a crazy thing how currency debasement really affects the optics of things. But anyway, that's all I really have to say on this. I just wanted to chime in with my 2 cents on that because of the pushback that I got in the comments section of yesterday's video. Don't assume that Trump can't fire Powell just because that's not the way the law is written. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe and happy stacking. If you're watching this later, do me a favor, leave a comment down below. If you're in the live stream, appreciate you tuning in. I will catch you next time. Stay safe and happy stacking.